Park with the horse, right?
Yeah, I know, I love my phone, and my son was right about to me, oh, goodness. Make watches, or, you know, all right, so.
Main, that's the. Joe first. Oh my God.
All right, we got all ready? Oh, wait a second. Tell me when. I'm ready when you are. Okay, hit it. Hello, everybody. Let's call together the planning board meeting for Wednesday, September 20th. The first item on our agenda is to approve the minutes from the August 16th, 2023 planning board meeting. Anybody have any questions regarding those?
I have one.
Yes.
I had recused myself from the Hill one.
Oh, you didn't. You made a vote on it. I'll fix that.
I didn't vote.
No, you refused. I apologize, Earl. I got you. Amended. Anyone else? Nope. Can we approve these minutes with the correction? Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion that we approve these minutes? Okay, and a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thanks, Teresa. Okay, the first and only thing on our agenda tonight is the Menon Heights subdivision. What? Oh, wait, we gotta vote. I'm sorry, I always forget to vote. Vote to about the minutes. Yes, everyone
Abstain.
abstain. Okay. So moving on, Menon Heights subdivision sketch layout review. Menon Heights Estates LLC, 314 Hollywood Avenue, Rochester, New York, for a 17 lot cluster development. Subdivision on property located on Mendon Ionia Road directly across from Langpath Road, consisting of 39.9 acres. Welcome.
Good evening.
Hi.
My name is Ed Martin. I'm a licensed engineer with DDS. I'm here tonight representing Drew Costanza and his application that we've submitted. Also in attendance tonight is Chris Costanza, who is architect. In the event that you have a question best answered by either one of them, I'll invite them forward. But we're really early in this process, so I think what we're looking for is some feedback here where we can hopefully progress to soil testing. We need to kind of lock in lot layout before we do that because the land is served by septic systems. So I'll jump into a couple of details here. We're proposing connections to Mendon Ionia Road along the west boundary. I trust you've had a chance to review the materials we've submitted.
Yes.
So we want to use clustering of section 278 of the town law to deviate from the code. Traditionally, clustering is done and there are no limits on what you can do. Mendon's code's a little unique in that you have certain restrictions on how much you can deviate. For example, you can't go below 3/4 of an acre. You still need 50 feet of road frontage, and I think there's one or two other things. The concept before you meets those requirements. I know that your building inspector has brought up a comment about the private drive to the north, but we can get into that in a minute. But so the site is served by private septic and on-site wells. If we were to develop this under traditional development approaches, you would have something that's much more dense. And if you're okay with me sharing this drawing, I can show you a sketch. I know Corey had mentioned that typically one is two concepts are typically submitted. One that shows what maximum density is. And this is a very traditional layout that you would see if what I'll call a typical developer were to make application. And what that is, it's basically maximizing the yield from the land. And you'll note that there's a curb cut at the north end, and there's a curb cut at the south end. You need one for the front.
Yes, thank you.
And you'll see that all of the lots meet the requirements for your code. It would disturb your environmental protection overlay districts or EPODs. It would also require a lot of earthwork. So some developers would say that doesn't matter, let's pursue maximum yield. I advise Drew to be sensitive to your EPODs and to decide what is the minimum you can get away with in terms of development. And Chris, his architect, has some very unique designs out there. He's got some clients that are interested in potentially buying a couple of these lots. So what we developed was the concept that's reflected on the board here. It's just shy, just shy of half of the number of lots. There are 33 reflected in the traditional layout that's before you there. So why would 17 work and not 33? Well, because there's a lot less infrastructure to put in. And it's also catering to the market that Chris kind of brings to the table. And that's something more unique. These people aren't looking for cookie cutter lots. And it also plays well with the fact that you have these EPODs, so we can preserve a lot more of the trees that are on site right now. There's a lot less earthwork. And quite frankly, I think it's more consistent with what is in the area. I have an uncle that lives just down the road from this, and I'm sure he wouldn't want to see 33 lots go in there. So we're here tonight asking you to really focus more on what we want to build. Let's talk about any problems you see with it, make any adjustments, and hopefully walk out of here tonight able to release me to do some soil testing and get the health department out there before the weather changes. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, the first thing I noticed on this was that you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 houses on this private drive, and our code only allows for 4.
Corey brings that up in his code. And I didn't know, again, going back to clustering, a traditional cluster would allow us to deviate from that code requirement. But because you have some other restrictions that are unique to Mendon's clustering, I don't know if that's a possibility, or would this board consider supporting variance or something like that? I have not discussed with Drew if dropping this to 16 lots is acceptable, so I don't want to commit to that if we don't have to.
Okay, and you have two separate spots. They're not connected by a cul-de-sac or at the end here. These two, your proposed private drive and your dedicated road,
Completely
they are
separate.
not connected.
They're not connected. The one to the north is truly private. Those landowners would contribute to the construction of that private drive. The one to the south, we would propose to be dedicated. And before any house down there could be built, that roadway would have to be installed up front. The only unique part to this layout, and I don't know if anybody picked up on it, but lot number 17, the frontage for that is actually on the dedicated road that's at the south end, even though his driveway access is to the private drive. So from a purely subdivision standpoint, it's compliant by giving the road frontage to the other one, to the cul-de-sac.
Oh,
And that's simply just to preserve the frontage along the private drive for the lot that's at the corner, and just to make the layout work better.
On the private drive lots, how did you determine the layout of those lot lines? What are the long swaths that are running parallel to the private drive?
These right here.
Yeah, why wouldn't you just bring the lot lines to the,
If
perpendicular? to
the town allows landlocked property, I would. Most towns don't allow that. Because this is a private drive, the driveway is not a public roadway, so there is the frontage for public right of way is actually out here.
All of those homes would be accessed from that driveway.
The 5 here, yes.
So how would they be landlocked if the
So if we
lot
were to
lines
do
were
it,
brought there?
if we were to do that, let's say this property line would come down here, this property would not have any public right of way frontage, which is the definition of landlocked.
Oh, I see. You're using the lot lines running
Yes,
parallel
it's
to
from
the
a
right of way.
subdivision standpoint.
Gotcha. All right, I see. So I see you've got 3 EPODs listed, but I think you're missing one. It looks like we also fall into EPOD number 2, which is the steep slope. I can show you right here if you missed it. But that might affect your calculations for the development of the site and the number of lots that you're allowed.
Well, so that's the interesting thing about your code. Can I hang on to this?
Yeah, you can keep.
Thank you. So nothing in your code says to, well, it does say to take that layout, exclude EPODs and right of way and divide by the lot. And that's how we came up with that 33 number, I think it is, but we can certainly.
So you take the amount of land that you have on the lot, you subtract the EPODs from it, and then you divide that by the number of normal allowable lot size.
Exactly. So what we have right here is roughly 40 acres for the overall property. We remove all EPOD areas in right away, and that kind of sets it.
Right, and you were left with about 25. But then if you take into account that steep slope pod, it might change your calculations.
I'll take a look at it. I would be surprised if we did, because just, do you know what percentage slope?
30%.
Yeah, I don't think there's that much.
So just looking at it blown up on the computer, to me, it looks like it's about 10 acres or so. But I don't know if any of that overlaps with
That's
other
what I was gonna say,
depots,
I'm
so
sure
so
it
you would have to
overlaps.
do an overlay and
Less.
see.
And so the other question I would have for you, is this jurisdictional, or is our topographic survey jurisdictional? In other words, you may have areas mapped that you think are greater than 30%, but are not reflected in our field topography.
Regarding the EPAD you're talking about.
Yes.
Correct? So we have EPAD maps, and those are the maps that we use to determine the
Okay.
size and the acreage.
So that brings up an interesting question, which I get into in my letter to you, and we provided aerial images. You have a woodlot EPOD that historically has not always been wooded, and I think we demonstrated that pretty well. So how does that play into this whole consideration? And I don't want to tell you to run your town like other towns, but just my experience with dealing with EPODs, it doesn't necessarily exclude development, but it's kind of a red flag. Hey, we want to make sure we're taking a closer look at this. So in light of that,
So you would need to apply for an EPAD permit and get an EPAD permit if there was going to be any encumbrance on the
Okay.
on the EPADs. And so as it's laid out now, the EPADs should be accounted for and subtracted. And like Teresa says, the steep slope one, she's not sure. She looked, she doesn't know how much that might affect the number of lots.
right, so that determines the number you can build, but it doesn't tell you you can't build a house or lot within that EPOD. You see that?
Right, you can build within, but you need to have an EPAD permit.
Right.
And so that's, that's
Sure.
that's not a given.
And
that
that's
you would-
the-
It's
and
not a
that's
given
board
that the
issues?
town would, it's a planning board issue or a code enforcement officer
Okay.
issue. But there's no guarantee just because you could build
Right,
in an EPOD that you would actually be able to obtain an EPOD
Right.
permit.
right. That makes sense.
Okay.
How did you determine your lot sizes? I noticed some are much larger than the
So,
minimum and.
so it's a combination of efforts. One of them is taking Chris's brain, which is very creative architect, I'm an engineer, black and white, clean boxes and things like that, and understanding house placement and things like that. And then also trying to preserve as much of things like your woodlot as possible. And then taking another layer of how do we make septic systems work out here and how do we make drainage work? So all of these things, we kind of prioritize them and try to set some rules, and sometimes we have to massage that a little bit. Does that answer your question? So
Yeah.
generally speaking, these are, I'm gonna call it like it is, these would be more cookie cutter type of houses that are built here. These back here, we foresee being much higher end, somebody that's got a very unique build.
I think to the east is probably where a lot of the steeper slope is. So building there would, well, according to the EPOD maps, I don't know, and also by your contours, it looks like they might be a little steeper to the east of the lot where you have a lot of the wooded area. Those three
We've got some
properties.
steep slopes here.
Where is two roughly on here?
Two. Oh,
The EPAT.
so it's on basically it's on all three sides, but it kind of clips parts of it. It doesn't cover the entire
Okay.
area. So in this part, though, this is where most of it is according to our maps. But anyway, but I was just gonna say, I appreciate that you're trying to preserve the wooded area as much as possible. But I feel like you could preserve more of it by pulling those properties to the east, a little bit over to the west.
You're talking about these two.
Yes, if you could kind of pull those in to avoid more of that wooded area, I think that would be a good
Yeah,
move. And if it isn't a steep slope, you would also be, saving some money potentially and foundations and all of that anyway.
those happen to be the ones that I think Chris's people lined up for, that are looking to be off the beaten path a little bit, so.
That's
So if we assume that my calculations, once I overlay the 30% steep slope maps, that we can yield based on your criteria, at least 17 lots. And understanding that you're not overly thrilled about those 2 eastern lots there. Is there anything else that we should be looking at, possibly adjusting?
Earl, what do you got?
Cul-de-sac to the Mendon Ionia Road. What is that elevation change between Mendon Ionia and cul-de-sac?
He's about 100 feet tall from the road back to the property.
Well, do you want to know just the cul-de-sac?
Yeah, it's going down to the cul-de-sac. What is the elevation change from there to the road?
Close to 50 feet,
Of elevation change.
yeah.
From that point to the back is how much going up to the back?
A little over 50 feet. And it varies obviously, but. Chris, did you say about 100 from? Yeah,
According to Google Earth.
yeah, so that makes sense.
Well, we have water coming to the cul-de-sac or nearby. Where's that water gonna go now? We've increased our flow.
So. We foresee using infiltration for the majority of stormwater for this. With the quarry that's just to the south of here, we're expecting really good percolation rates. We would do a stormwater management system that's compliant with the DEC regulations, which doesn't allow us to increase rates of runoff and requires a certain level of what's called green infrastructure that ensures water quality.
Normally, I interpret cluster as a number of houses on a small area and leaving the rest of it in a wild state where it was and not utilizing the rest of the area for high-end homes. And that's what we have here. We have 3 for sure, 4, maybe 5 high-end homes in an area that supposedly we're saving the land and we're moving this to a cluster. So
Right, and there's this area that's also preserved for open space, and do you have that on here? Areas
So
that are preserved for open space?
when you say open space, are we talking that's passive, dedicated? There's different types of open space. They would like to incorporate a trail of some sort,
Okay,
which until we lock in the layout, we can't really.
right, so specifically, the code says that the areas to be preserved for open space purposes include playgrounds and parks shall be in an amount, location, quality, and contiguous shape as desirable for accessibility to all developed properties and open space preservation as determined by the planning board. Where possible, all land not contained within the lots, roads, right-of-ways, or designated preserve shall be contiguous and of such size and shape as to be usable for recreation and or open space.
So it sounds like it could be either. As I said, and or forward.
Well, it could be usable for recreation and or open space, but I don't know, I didn't see on here where this open space would be.
Well,
Kind of jumping onto what Earl said about preserving the land and putting a cluster in a small,
so that's part of your cluster code, or is that part of your general? code?
that is part of our cluster code.
Okay.
Yeah, the,
Seems like it starts off as a cluster, but then it spreads out.
Right, and I mean, in the interest of full disclosure, we started with a layout that basically stayed completely out of the woods altogether. And I got a lot of pushback, mainly because of the images that I provided you at the end. I was made aware of that by Chris and Drew, that back in the 90s, there were very few trees on this property.
But these are our current EPOD maps that we have to work with. So historically, what it was is not what it is today.
Which is why I asked the question, how do we manage something like somebody buy the property to invest in, for development as part of a retirement, and had we kept clearing it like it was done previously, we probably wouldn't be in the situation, so he's being penalized. So I'm just asking the question, how does this get handled? To me, it sounds like a land taking, to be honest with you.
You guys don't need to engage in that.
We don't have to.
discussion. Yeah, we're not
Okay,
gonna.
I mean, just we go by our
Hold on,
EPOD maps,
let me,
right?
we're not gonna get into a constitutional takings analysis, but. The EPODs were established in accord with their law and their codes, and those are on the books, and the maps are there, and. The development is subject to the code and EPODs. This board is is dealing with the code as stated. We're not a legislature, so we're taking the code and we're gonna apply it to the proposed development.
Right, and I can appreciate that. I realize that, but the EPOD also doesn't preclude development. So I think there's gotta be some kind of, I'll call it a common sense approach that allows a certain level of development. I'm sure you can appreciate the position that Drew is in.
Well, for instance, for me,
Well, can I just,
sorry, go ahead.
yeah, let me finish this. So check out chapter 138. That lists all the EPODs, and every EPOD has its own, I think it's an article, yeah, its own article within the chapter that that sets forth the analysis for development therein in order to acquire a development permit.
Okay,
So I think there's one EPOD that actually doesn't allow any development. But most of them, except for that one, I believe, does permit development with an EPOD in accordance with that specific EPOD's regulations.
okay.
So EPODs can be developed in accordance with a newly issued EPOD permit in accordance with 138. So check that out. Regarding open space, if you look at 226-8. I think it's E, yeah, E. Sorry. I, not E, I. 1. There's a statement there that talks about how much open space is required, and in here it talks about open space being land that's not within building lots or roads. So in this instance, it would pretty much be that stuff in the middle. There's a minimum requirement set forth in the cluster provisions.
Okay.
So I think, if you're gonna come in as a cluster, there are certain provisions we need to apply. If you're not coming in as a cluster, then we're looking at if you need variances and things for setbacks and whatnot. We're gonna look at it that way.
Yeah.
Right now, it's kind of, we're looking at this as a cluster. And I think it would be helpful in talking about that if, when we see you again, if you would set forth for us what relief you're looking for under the cluster specifically, lot 1, where we want to reduce the setbacks from X to Z,
Gotcha.
those kind of things, because just looking at it, it's hard for me to tell. And I know that you're looking for 0.75 acre lots, which is allowable under cluster, so that's one thing, certainly. But I think there's probably some setback.
When you give you a table that says lot 1 is this,
Yeah.
lot 2 is that.
That'd be helpful.
Okay.
If you look through that cluster code at that chapter 2, article 1 of chapter 226-8, it talks about, and I think this is what the board is getting at, preserving open space, and the reason for clustering is to protect EPODs and other things like that. So, what they're getting at is you may have houses spread out, but the lots are very big and they're smack
Right.
dab in a bunch of EPODs.
Right. Can we go back to the open space? It sounds like that may be a separate lot that gets created at the town. Because you said it's excluded from public right of way or building lots. So does that mean it would be a separate lot that gets dedicated to the town?
I think that might be one way of interpreting that, yeah, because it says, and I'm quoting, all land not included in building lots or road rights of way shall be designated as open space.
So in other municipalities where they don't want to take dedication of those kind of lands, we've done easements. If you don't want to take that, so I'm just throwing this out there as an idea for you guys to think about between now and next time we see you. We could show them in easements, call it forever wild, no developments, whatever, however you want to word that, but I think you might want to choose that over taking a dedicated lot.
So when we're looking at a cluster development and we're referring back to the town code 226-8B, one of the main things that we're trying to do with this cluster is to preserve the natural and scenic qualities of the open space and contiguous open space to protect local ecology, including freshwater wetlands, woodlots, steep slopes, geological features, stream corridors, and other areas of environmental value, scenic vistas, scenic corridors, and historic sites. So this, to me, I don't know how anyone else is looking at it, but what we're looking at right here does not look like that's what is being presented. And this space that's in the middle, who owns that? Of course, I have no my glasses, but I have just this little tiny.
Robert and Roxana Wolf, you're talking about this area right here?
Right, so that's
Yeah.
not part of any open space.
Yeah, it's an
because-
unusual property. It's kind of U-shaped.
Right, so then there's a possibility someone may want to be building a home in that spot there too.
There's already homes there.
Oh, there's already homes there. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. I'm sorry.
Those are the people that sold the land. That is around the UK around there.
Got it. So how many homes are actually there right now?
3.
3?
And it started off with one farmhouse that owned like 60 acres.
Uh-huh.
And then he kept like a, like a 8-acre parcel in the middle and then go to the big U shape. And then had a house on the
Sorry, I
back.
got it. Yeah.
And the person bought that, built the house and then sold out another piece. So it's just been kind of whittled away, but the owner, they build a house, they sell off the some don't want.
How big are the lots? Do you know about the 3 houses in the middle?
Well, one was on a very small lot, so like the original farmhouse lot,
Uh-huh,
and then.
Yeah, it looks like it's less than an acre.
It's like, what, 4 acres, 5 acres maybe?
okay.
Yeah, it looks like it's one, just under an acre, probably around 3, and then the other one looks like it's every bit of 5 to 6 acres.
So as we're getting a visual of this, we see 3 houses here and the development around those 3 houses. And the reason for not connecting, like having this dedicated road go right around and connect everything is, what was the reason for that?
So it started off with doing 2 driveways that largely stayed out of the woods. And then when I met with Drew and Chris, they said that they had clients that were eager to put houses back in these woods. So then we added those. We kind of pushed it into there based on clients that are potentially interested in building up there. So
But why does that dispense with the road being a public road?
Things cost.
yeah, so
If we build a mile of road versus building a quarter mile of dedicated road. The lot costs go from, 150,000, 175 per lot to 275, $300,000 a lot. And we're trying to make, we're trying to make a group of smaller houses, smaller lots where we can have, high efficiency, sustainable, high quality materials, so like stainless steel or like not stainless, so like standing seam roofs. Green roofs, so we don't want to have, this isn't supposed to be asphalt shingles, vinyl siding, vinyl shutters. That's not who the clients are that we design houses for. And we have a lot of clients that are either, young couples, they're looking that they're millennials, they have, 2 people that have jobs, no kids yet. They're looking to build something that's small, energy efficient, low maintenance. And then, be able to expand, like a bedroom addition or a 2-bedroom addition in the future for when they have kids. We also have a lot of clients that are empty nesters, which I think both of those in your comprehensive plan for the town. You talk about the lack of housing diversity and how we have a need for both the empty nesters and young families. And, those are the 2 biggest clients that we see that are building new houses. And when people come to us, my wife and I, we do sustainable architecture. So we do net zero buildings, passive house buildings, being certified buildings.
What's the name of your firm?
9 by 30 design.
Okay.
So all the clients that come to us that want an architect to build a net zero home. They're looking for something that's maintenance free, sustainable. It's either empty nesters or downsizing and they want something that they can age in place in. Or it's young couples that want to basically grow and have something that's kind of maintenance free and smaller. So they're not looking for the 2-story atrium spaces where you walk in. They're not looking for these extra bedrooms that never get used. They're looking for real compact, efficient layouts. With a lot of all the houses that we design are always, they're always meant for aging in place and for ADA adaptability. So, the goal is that each of these houses, they're able to be used by someone who is in a wheelchair because there's blocking that's put into the walls. It may not be a handrail, but for the bathroom, but there is blocking there, so you can actually install that later on. Doorways are certain widths, that way, wheelchairs can always get through each doorway. Handicap accessibility to the front entrance. So those are the types of things that we design. And the goal of this project, or the vision, I guess, is to have a smaller group of houses that are, you know, in the one price range. So, you know, new construction that is, you know, net zero or close to net zero is about $400 a square foot. So a lot of the houses that we're designing are, you know, 1,200 to 1,800 square feet. So it's not a huge house, but it's very high quality because it has a standing seam metal roof, has geothermal, has radiant floor heat. You know, they have solar, you know, solar exposure to come in for passive solar heating. So we try to make these maintenance-free homes that are really energy efficient. And then we have some clients that just, you know, they have 4 kids and they need a 4,000 square foot house. They're willing to spend $2.5 million, $3 million on construction. But, you know, a lot of times if they want something that's in a group and neighborhood with other people that are like-minded with sustainable, you know, ideas, they have to kind of go to, you know, a 10-acre or 5-acre lot that's kind of off the main road that goes, you know, a speed limit is 55 miles an hour. Or they're their last lot in like a, you know, a development that is basically all asphalt shingle houses. And then they buy the last lot and build this nice house with a standing seam metal roof. So, you know, the goal here is to try to make a neighborhood, a community that is all the higher quality homes, not necessarily big homes, but higher quality as far as, you know, the
Are you
construction.
planning on using geothermal in the cluster?
Either geothermal or air source heat pumps, but you know, radiant heat is something that we put in every single house, just because in this climate, radiant heat is the most comfortable heat. A lot of the houses that we do are ICF instead of concrete forms, so they're very soundproof, you know, very.
And achieved by vertical drilling?
Usually we don't do vertical drilling because there's gas pockets around here. So a lot of times what we do is we'll do a direct exchange, which is a 5-foot diameter hole, and they drill a you know, 65-foot 2-inch diameter hole, and each hole that they drill is half a ton of heating capacity. So typically there's a 5-foot hole, and the drill rig will basically drill a bunch of holes around in a circle. So we might have 7 or 8 of those for 3.5-4 tons of heating capacity. So that would be, you know, there's that option, which is called a direct exchange geothermal. And then there's also you know, the air source heat pump, which is more like you know, a VRF system.
So on these smaller lots, you're going to have septic systems, a well, and this geothermal approach.
Yeah, and geothermal, if it's the direct exchange, it's literally it's a 5-foot diameter hole that they drill. Right, I mean, they dig out a 5-foot diameter hole about 6 feet deep, and then they diagonal drill the cores that have it has a copper line that basically gets put down into it and they grout it in place. And then, you know, one of the ideas is that you want to have connection, you know, in between the houses for kids that live in the neighborhood. So the goal is on this property here to do like a 8 or 10 foot wide, you know, path, which would be like a pedestrian trail that goes around the whole outside and around the loop, and that's about 1 mile. So basically, a 1 mile loop. You know, one of the goals is that, you know, based on a project that we, you know, were in or dealt with in Costa Rica called Ecovita. You know, we want to have, you know, fruit trees planted on each lot, so that like one lot might be known as the peach lot, the other one might be known as the Empire Apple lot, the other one is the Red Delicious lot, and the one the pear lot. So, you know, when the development gets started up, you know, each lot is going to have fruit trees planted on it. So that way those fruit trees are along the outside border, the outside trail, so that people are going around the trail, they're basically, you know, as they go by, they see, oh, this is the peach lot, this is the pear lot. So, you know, to try to get those kinds of, you know, green, sustainable, you know, natural landscape kind of that's connected. So you have a lot that's 1.5 acres, but yet you have access to a 1 mile trail to walk your dog for your kids to get to the neighbor's house without having to go across, you know, the vehicle path. So that's kind of the idea, is to kind of make this as, you know, community. And at the same time, there's different wealth levels of what people can afford on houses. So there's smaller houses that might be, you know, 1,500 square feet, and larger houses that might be, you know, 5,000 square feet. That's kind of the overall goal, is to try to create a community that's a little bit different than the standard, you know, the standard development, where we're trying to maximize each lot. And to do, like, you know, the standard developers would look at this and say, let's do the road, and let's do the 33 lots, because, you know, it's down, you know, $2 million on the road divided by 33 lots, that's whatever it is, $80,000 per lot. You know, we didn't want to put a lot of money into, you know, the roadway. Plus, we're also conscious that, you know, the town has if we build a dedicated roadway, the town is gonna have an expense, and one of the things that the town. Comprehensive plan talks about is being, financially, fiscally, responsible with, development. And with something like this, we feel that the amount of dedicated road that the town would be, in charge of maintaining and plowing. That's minimal for the amount of tax base that you'll get because of the high quality homes. So I think that, this version of effective development, I think, would allow. The tax assessor to have a net increase versus, some of the, if we were to do. A mile of road with 33 houses. At that point, those houses being all assessed at, $400,000 or $500,000 a piece instead of, $1 million or $1.2 million or $2 million a piece. I think you're gonna see that this is actually, better for the town because we get more tax dollars, for the cost that it takes across the town in order to, maintain that road. So, we're trying to work with the comprehensive plan, trying to check off a bunch of check boxes of what the town overall is looking for. Like one of the things and that was important, I think, in the comprehensive plan that was done in 2021 was renewable energy sources. Most of the houses that we do, they all have the stainless steel metal roofs because those roofs you can just clip on solar panels right onto the standing seams. So one of the things that always bothers me is someone does a brand new asphalt roof, they put solar panels on it. And in order to do that, they drill 100 holes or 1,000 holes in the brand new roof. And then it's just caulk that holds that water into the roof. So the standing seam metal roof, the solar panels, it's clipped right on. And metal is 100% sustainable or recyclable after 100 years. So those are the types of the buildings that our clients are asking us to design. If they want no VOC materials, they want recyclable materials, they want low maintenance materials. So that's kind of what the plan is for this development. And we have some clients that are, ready to kind of, build a house there. We figure that once we probably build 2 or 3, then at that point, that community will be known kind of as the neighborhood that has, the high quality homes that may not big, but they all have stone siding or they have a hardy board siding, they have metal roofs, not asphalt. So we're trying to get away from, the fossil fuel products that end up in landfills every 20 years and try to make a higher quality, something you'd see in Europe. Those houses are 400 years old, they have, walls like this. And we're trying to make something that's higher quality. So that's the overall goal for this.
It seems to me that if your footprints want to be compact, like you just described, that your sites would also want to be compact, and that would go with your cluster development. But the lot sizes are all over the place. For instance, the irony is that you're trying to be sustainable, but you're merging into the wooded parts of the site that we would like to maintain. If you were to reduce the size, for instance, of this first lot that's on the private road, all of these houses could then move to the west and avoid this wooded area that we would like to try to preserve.
So on the wooded area, that was a field, when my father bought the property. Which was 1990, something like that. It was a field that was bush hogged by my dad a couple of times. And then he kind of stopped doing it. A lot of the trees that are there, they're not desirable hardwoods, there's a lot of sumac trees there. They're not something that is, I think, adding to the environment.
Well, there's wildlife,
Yeah, there's always gonna be wildlife there.
which is why we've delineated it as an area that we would like to preserve if possible.
And one of the things they got on the lot size, one of the things that, I did some studies when I was in college at Berkeley about how much space it takes for a family of 4 to kind of have an ecosystem that's, completely sustainable. So, my thesis was on lunar architecture. So if you're in outer space, everything you have to have has to be like with you in your building, in your spaceship. So 2 acres, about 1.88 acres for a family of 4 is kind of the minimum lot size where you could have a house, you could have agriculture, you could have livestock. That's basically that's kind of the sustainable ecosystem for a family of 4. So these lots are kind of based on that, roughly that, a family of 4, if you wanted to grow crops there or have chickens or whatever, it gives you enough space. If we condense the lots a lot, then my concern would be, are the neighbors these people are paying, whatever, $800,000, minimum for a house. You didn't want to be that close to a neighbor. And I think having the space where you can have, you know, forested area maybe in the back, a small, and we always try to push too, like, you know, for yards. One of the things we don't like to see is these huge expansive masses of grass that just get mowed. You know, the lawnmowers in some neighborhoods, the lawnmowers are 7 days a week from like 7 a.m. to like 7 p.m. All summer long, you go outside and you hear a lawnmower or a leaf blower. It's constant. So some of the neighborhoods that we like the most, that we've seen like developments around, you know, the world, around the country, are ones where the yard that's the mowed grass is just for, you know, a play area right off of a hardscape patio. So you have a courtyard in the house or a hardscape patio. Then you have a small grassy area that's for, you know, a kid to play, you know, kickball. But you're not mowing, you know, a quarter acre, a half acre in front of the house that nobody ever uses because it's up against the road. Like that can be bioswale, it can be rain garden, it can be areas that can take the stormwater from, you know, the metal roof that is impermeable. And then collect that right on site so that it's not going, you know, onto a neighboring property or into a storm sewer. So that's typically how we design stuff.
That would actually, so what I'm trying to get at is that basically if you could adjust the placement of some of these to avoid the EPOD areas of the wooded lot, for instance. I think you can do it, and it would accomplish what you're saying. You can come up, can I show you real quick?
Yeah, and I mean, these
So for
are
instance-
general layouts, but
I
you really
understand
want to
that,
stagger
but
these.
for instance, this highlighted area, this is your wooded lot, EPOD.
Yep.
If this lot, if this house, you could keep the lot size the way it
strip
is,
that
for
over.
instance. If this was to be moved out of that area, then you could sort of do what you're saying. Then you wouldn't have to mow any of that. That could stay wooded.
Yeah.
And then what you're trying to be sustainable about could just be around the pad of the house, and this could all be wild. And then you would be out of the way of any environmentally sensitive areas. I think, I understand.
This area right here, too, this is actually the nicer area, because this area right here where the creek and the ravine is,
Mhm.
those trees there are actually, you know, like there's a bunch of trees that are 100 years old,
Yeah,
whereas these trees are all 20 years old.
I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I think if just with a little bit of finessing, you could really kind of think about what your goals are and rearrange some of these on the lot. This is after you do your recalculation to see if you can actually fit the 17 on there.
Yeah.
If it works out that it's only 15, then actually it might help you, because then all you have to do is maybe condense some of these and open up some of this
So-
wooded area.
I maybe this was my bad too, but I thought that like this level of discussion here was kind of show you how many houses, you know, roughly where they go, that kind of stuff with, you know, septic systems. Do we need to get into detail? Because we haven't really designed, we don't have,
So,
we don't have 10 houses, you know, designed for this.
no, this is just for your layout. It's a sketch plan review.
Yeah, so if we show a layout where some houses are staggered or pushed or more condensed, then if someone buys that lot in 2 years from now, they want to have the house, no, I'd rather build the house in the back of the
The
lot.
placement matters
And
of
they-
the house. That is important, I think.
You would have to come back with a site plan for that.
So it has to be within the range. And then, you know, like right now, we have like 4,500 square foot, we have big houses shown here. You know, I anticipate all these smaller lots to be half that size or less. So if we have something that's approved for a big house and then we shrink it down for what exactly gets built. Does that require a revisit to the board or no?
You mean the footprint of the actual
yeah, like-
pad of the
like-
house?
So if I understand you right, let's say this lot stays the same and the house that they want to build is half the size.
Right?
You don't have to come back to this because nothing's really changing unless you were to move the house to a different area. One reason why we show a big footprint is to build that flexibility, because questions arise like, hey, can you get a septic system to work on a site with a big house and a well? Because you have to have 100 feet of separation between the septic system and the well, you know?
Yeah, so I hear.
And that's gonna be able to happen on these smaller lots.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at our code at 22615. D. 2. It talks about some of the preliminary stuff that we want to look at this phase, including delineating ag lands, delineating EPODs. House locations and possible clustering, alignment of steep streets and trails, and drawing in the lot lines. So those are kind of like the 4 things that we're asked to look at this stage. And I think like just looking at your pictures that you provided of development and the growth of trees, it does look like a lot of those are that the E-Pod is like really focused on, as far as I can tell. Focused on the trees that have been there the longest.
Yeah,
Over here.
it's a ravine that wasn't mowed. It was.
But even going back to your 1994 picture, it looks like it was there. So that would be over here. All this stuff around here doesn't seem to be within a tree pod. You know, the north and south is free of the tree pod down here. These are, there's no tree, pods over here, according to the map.
Yep.
Then if you look at your pictures, that's where the trees are back in 1994, right here. So I think it looks consistent to me.
Yeah, I think that the ravine where like the seasonal stream is, where it had the larger trees, because no one was mowing that, it was too steep. That kind of just spread out, so like the brush, you know, they were shrub bushes, you know.
Yeah, without getting into the minutia, I'm just looking at these pictures from, you know, way far away and looking at this and. You know, from 1994, as far back as you go, we go to 1985, but it's really kind of blurry, so I can't tell. They look. From Eagle, you know, just from a far back view, it would be fairly consistent.
Yeah, and with some of these larger lots too, like I know one of our clients that's looking at one of the ones that's up on top of the hill. You know, their goal is to have, you know, a 2,800, 2,500 square foot house. Something that is, you know, set back. They're actually looking at other lots that are kind of in woods, so they can set it back and have kind of woods around to, you know, for privacy and stuff, so that when neighbors, they can't see the neighbor's window, neighbors can't see their windows. So, you know, the goal on a lot that is a larger lot is not to clear cut, you know, all the trees. The goal is to basically just, you know, use those trees that are there, the existing landscape, as much as possible. Maybe make a driveway that kind of curves around, so that way there's, you know, like the house itself is hidden. You know, it's more private, but you know, they would want to, I'm sure, you know, an area that's cleared for, you know, a patio and you know, a grassy yard area for kids and dog, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, whether you're clustering or not, you're in, you know, you're in the E-Pods, so. You know, E-Pod, the woodlot E-Pod talks about what needs to be done in order to develop it. It talks about surveying, just to give you an idea of what you're in for. Surveying all trees to be removed on the site that are over 6 inches in diameter. And measured at breast height and identified by species condition and worthiness for preservation. So that's A of, you know, just to give you an idea of kind of what we're talking about when we're talking about preservation. We're talking about preserving individual trees in the E-Pods. So to the extent you can limit your footprint in those areas sort of to the back of the site.
So trees that are less than 6 inch diameter, what is the, I mean, can I just cut those tomorrow? Because they're, I think that's.
I'm not gonna get into, I'm just trying to give you I'm
But I mean,
trying to,
That's
as a
part of
courtesy,
the
give you an
EPOD.
example.
If we pursue development within that EPOD, we'll have to do that survey.
But I mean, I don't even think there's very many of those newer trees that are more than 6 inches in diameter.
yeah, I'm just trying to give you an example of kind of what the E-Pod permitting process looks like.
The bottom line we have here, a defined development that is clustered, only half is cluster. So I think if you want to jump on the cluster, the whole house, the whole place should be cluster, not selective. We put cluster here, and we're going to put major lots here at high end. You're gonna do high end houses, do the whole thing high end. Don't throw cluster at this point.
I mean, they're also meant to be high quality, just that they're meant to be different sizes, so, you know, 1,500 square feet houses and 3,500 square feet houses.
So one other thing, just to help, it's hard to assess this under the cluster. It's hard for the board to assess it without fleshing this out a little bit more in accordance with the cluster code. One of the big things that we talked about with open space and how it isn't on a building lot or right of way, and so we can't really see what that looks like on this map.
Yeah,
this
I've
way.
been here to clearly delineate
Yeah.
that open space.
So I think that would be helpful.
The, also, that private road can't have the 5 houses on it, so it either has to be a dedicated road or it has to have the maximum of 4.
And a variance is not an option for that.
I'm not sure about.
It may be.
zoning.
No, yeah, not from, probably not from this board. but
Yeah, not from
Right.
this.
I'm supposing there's probably.
But if we were to pursue that, do you think this board would support that variance if there's a good reason for it?
Hard to say, it probably depends on all the
Sure.
other stuff we're talking
Yeah,
about.
okay. I have a pretty good idea of what we need to do. Do you have any questions? No, not really.
I have just one question. This circle here, what is that? What's the purpose of that? Aesthetics?
As opposed to having the full paved cul-de-sac?
Yes.
So it would be what we call an island cul-de-sac. The center would be vegetated to some extent, whether it's lawn or tree or something. I typically try to use that area for stormwater management in other ones. So a traditional one is all paved, instead of paving the whole thing, you keep the center green.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm wondering about the radius. Looks a little tight for fire equipment, maybe?
It's not, we've done smaller ones than this in the town of Greece, which is very tough with their. But all of those details, I mean, I can add more detail to that when we come back with a concept plan, but you would certainly make sure that your fire marshal is satisfied with the cul-de-sac.
And I'm just curious as to your source of water for firefighting.
That was one of the things that Corey brought up too.
Yeah, I mean, individual wells. Are you
Well,
gonna
you know,
hydrants?
so typically what we do is some kind of draftable source. That's a challenge here because I expect these perks to run really well. So it doesn't lend itself to a permanent pool of water. This is another one of those conversations that we have to have with your fire marshal. Like, I don't know about your fire departments, if they have, some of them have, I don't know the terminology, but tanker trucks that have water that bring them to a site, they set up a temporary pool. They pour into it, they keep running for water from the nearest water main.
Yeah, I'm not sure
So-
if that'd be acceptable or not.
I know, I think Corey mentioned,
And that would apply whether we're doing a cluster or anything. So that's one of those conversations we expect to have as we go into more detailed design.
right, well, the fire protection needs to be, according to the New York State Fire Code. So whatever you decide, you know what I mean? However you think it's gonna happen, but it has to match the, New York State Code. And it's section 507 of the code.
I always thought that we would have a fire hydrant of the dedicated road. And then from the fire hydrant.
With its own source.
And so you're gonna run you're gonna run water up there
Well,
to get the hydrant?
isn't there a water main and there's no water main?
No?
No, if there was, you wouldn't be drilling wells.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that might be an issue you might, we're not saying to design, the whole system right now, but just get an idea of what you might do.
Yeah, it's a conversation I have to have. Corey's your fire marshal, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Again, we're not saying needs to be exactly this or that, but just that is feasible.
Yeah, so one of the things that happens with public water, with long driveways, we will often do, it's called a dry or a flow through sprinkler system. It runs off the domestic service. Now that's readily acceptable on public water. I've never done it on a well like this, so I don't know if that would be an option, but again, this is a conversation I have with Corey. I'll address all of his comments in writing when I come back to you.
Yes, and the only other thing I was thinking as I look at this like little cul-de-sac here. The town highway department supervisor would have to look at this, but as you're plowing in the winter, the snow in this area and you're going around this, where's the snow going from that?
So that center area actually gives them a place to dump it.
Even though you have vegetation and
Yeah,
things growing in
so
there?
what I've done, and I've done this multiple times in Greece, is I depress that center area and I use it for stormwater management,
Mhm.
direct the runoff to that. It provides storage for snow in the winter time. It works pretty well.
And your turnaround here is good for snowplows and things like that to be able to maneuver around.
It is, and the right of way that's reserved, if we wanted to change that at this board, or your fire marshal or anybody else decided that they don't like the island cul-de-sac, we can turn that into a traditional one. We have the flexibility to do that.
Lauren, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm hearing is that the board wants the board's intent here is to respect the EPODs as much as possible.
Yes, absolutely.
And probably would favor a lower density development like you're showing there, as opposed to something like this, the conventional, because this is a lot more dense. But either way, you know, dealing with the EPOD in a way that respects with the code.
Right, and the recreational
and to-
areas that we'd like those
If you
defined.
could delineate the steep slope EPOD on your next drawing.
Will this be completed in phases or are you thinking all at once?
In phases, and that goes back to the question that was raised earlier, why the loop road or why a connection wasn't made. The north end is private, that is most likely phase one that generates income that is allowed to create the letter of credit required for the public road at the south. So we're really seeing at least 2 phases for something like this.
All right, if you could show the phases then too on the next
Okay,
one.
yeah.
that'd be good.
Thank you for that clarification on the notes there. That helps a lot.
Sure.
Okay.
I think that's good. Are you going to, when you come back with a, I don't know where you stand, did you want to come back for another conversation once you tweak some? Did you want to come back with an actual site plan?
Right.
And talk about your actual site plan at that time?
I think I'd like to come back at concept, make sure that this board is comfortable with the layout, because before we can really do hard design, we need to do soil testing. That's a critical part of this, and you can't do it without the leach fields knowing where they're gonna go, so.
Okay.
depending on the layout.
Okay, so you can get a hold of Katrina then and she
Yeah.
can get something else scheduled. In the meantime, if you can just familiarize yourself with that cluster development in our code, just
Sure
so
will.
that you're sure that you're understanding what that is.
We can keep that, that's a printout of the code section for that.
Thank you.
That's 226.8, right?
Yep, 226.8 cluster development. Okay, then I guess we'll see you back very shortly.
Soon.
Thank you very much.
So you know, we both have on any planning board agenda, if you're coming in just for another sketch review, I would need everything by noon the week prior to give them time to review, to put you on any upcoming agenda. And then when you make formal application, then we're going to be pushed out, because it's got to go to the planning. board.
Thanks for your feedback.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing all that.
Right. I know we're gonna, so the next item on our agenda is public comment, and we're wondering if there's any public that would like to speak at this time. You can speak regarding what has just been discussed here. You can speak of about anything else in the town that you'd like to talk about. So we'd be happy to hear from you if you have anything that you'd like to add to this conversation.
I don't really have anything to add, I was just kind of here. to get some information.
Because your property backs up to,
Yes,
Can I get your name and
It's
address?
Streets of Worley.
Okay.
Yes, I spoke with your husband. and then Yes. He couldn't come easily. Correct.
Okay, I'm saying.
lucky you.
Yeah.
I got one of those too. Thanks.
Worley. Yeah, I got a, he's in your house number. It's 844. Okay, then I, yeah, okay, thank you. Just. Yeah, so our driveway is very long.
You're in the middle parcel.
No, we are.
They're back here. They're over here, right?
Yeah, we're up here.
Your
So this
driveway's
is
here.
our driveway. So this
Oh.
is all gonna be,
A long driveway.
it's a really long driveway, yeah.
How far, Teresa?
It's like 3/4 of a mile.
Ours
the whole
too.
thing. Yeah.
Yep, ours
so-
too. It would kill, well.
I know. I
I'm not,
know, I know. So
scratch that
that's-
from the minute. I didn't say that.
That's why, that's kind of why we're here, or I'm here, but, yeah, so we just found out about it, just wanted to get some information and,
You know, it's,
I can have this.
since we're early in the
Okay,
process,
great.
it would be
Go ahead.
here. Might be, I'm not advising you legally, but just as a suggestion, it might be in your interest to talk to these people about your concerns directly.
When I was speaking with him, was going to.
Yeah, I think he was gonna, yeah, yeah,
Because they're still developing
Lands.
this.
Yeah.
Conceptually.
yeah,
That's the
For
one they
sure.
have submitted. This
okay,
is one that said we could submit,
yeah, so
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 that's
that's-
one too.
certainly don't want that, that's even worse, but, yeah. I don't know, so I guess. I'm sure it's gonna happen.
Can you show me on here where your driveway is?
Mhm.
Oh, so, so we're up here, this is our driveway. Right there. Oh, this is, yeah,
So you're back here.
we're back.
Charlie,
So, I mean, I know you guys were saying,
yeah,
you would like
that's the
to
driveway here.
push
Oh,
the bigger
got it.
lots down a little, which, you know, that would be good too.
I think my sign should be involved in this.
There was, right. There is a lot, there's a lot of trees there, I don't know. If you guys.
They've got some stuff here.
Up back there, oaks and maple.
Yeah, there's a lot
Yeah.
of big.
Yeah, I mean, it's.
That would be terrible to.
How much of a hill do you have? You go down and then you go back up. How much of a hill do you have when you drive?
Up to our house.
Yeah.
This isn't just. But we're up pretty far, I don't know how high it is.
He said that it would go down about 40 feet where their cul-de-sac is. That goes up another 50 feet and you're above that, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, so that might be right, because it's not. It's pretty flat all along until you get like up to like basically the end of our driveway. And then it's like a really steep hill to get up. All along where they're gonna be doing that, all this cluster stuff is flat. This, I'm not, that's starting to go up a little hill, but it's not major.
Is somebody there tomorrow?
Yeah, I'll be there tomorrow.
If
Yeah.
you see a green truck, it'll be me.
Yeah,
There's a
Okay.
possibility there would be periodically.
But if
just
it's
if you're
brown,
okay
it
with
would be-
it,
yeah,
because I know someone else was gonna come out, but we wanted to make sure.
yeah, that's no problem. Okay, well, thank you.
Well, thank you for your comments.
When formal application is made, you'll get, as the budding neighbor, I'll send you a letter at the public hearing, and then there'll actually be a public hearing, so it's a subdivision.
Okay,
So, but I mean, even if they made formal application, say we're at least 5 weeks out until that would even happen.
okay,
But you can always call.
okay, yeah, good, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, we've got some general discussion. I don't know if anybody has anything general that they want to talk about. We've got some upcoming meetings.
I was just, he said that the houses in the cluster were going to be smaller. 2,500 square feet.
Or 1,500, I think I heard
Or
him say.
1,500, except that right in the smack dab in the middle of the cluster, he said, it says 4,500 square foot home, typical of the cluster. So
And so how is that with the
I can't
the
see,
setbacks and all of that?
I can't see 4,500 square foot houses right here.
Well, I think the engineer, the man that was presenting, said that was just, generic for now,
Okay,
and then they would revise that once it came time.
The cluster moniker does not fit.
Nope.
Yeah, they got a lot of feedback, hopefully. We get a revised concept, we can take a closer look at.
Or come in with two subdivisions, cluster to the north.
I thought that too,
To the south.
right? The
Conventional.
cluster like up here with the rest of this being
Open.
open. And then back to here and then doing what they wanted to do over
There.
here with
4 houses.
4 houses, yeah. I don't know, and remember, this is an open space in here either. There's already houses there too.
There is water on 64, but it's quite a bit north. That's where the reservoir is. There's a 16-inch water main out 64.
but it stops short of this.
Yeah,
Quite a way short of that, right? So happy day for that.
Glad you brought up the water.
Oh,
Good
we've
idea.
got McWilliams subdivision public hearing coming up on October 4th.
Right, real quickly, you're not here, Nicole, okay, Nicole will be here, if anyone else, as long as we have quorum, we're good. So that was the one that came in for sketch review with Algorithm, this is their formal application.
Okay, he's the one from Ohio, correct?
Correct,
Okay.
yes.
All right.
All right.
And then Donaldson Junior site plan.
Yes, so you're secondary, he's going before the zoning board. So I don't know if you remember the subdivision on Lanning, so we've got dad and son, both named Scott, so I had to classify as junior, so we knew. Scott's, you know, in the process of building, he needs the pond and he wants to build a pretty large scale barn. Problem is the setbacks and all of this, it's gonna be forward from the house with the positioning is why you're involved. But he's gotta go in for the variance because they want to move the pond to make it bigger, encompassing two lots.
I do, like they
Yeah.
want to make that, they each have a pond, but now they want to make it
One big one,
big.
better for fire suppression, so they've got to get the variance for the pond. Not meeting
Nice.
100 foot setback from any property line. So that's next Thursday, if they get approved, then we'll move forward with the site plan review for forward front of the home. Is all this, it's just, you know, an accessory structure in the front yard, it's just the positioning of it all.
Yeah, like the one like Bob Moore's.
Right, flag lot type
Yeah, but
situations.
it's like, I always
Yeah.
drive by there and go, who approved that? I know. So now anybody who's got something forward that's big, I'm gonna be,
Yes, and if it's going.
I'm gonna, well,
Yeah,
not me,
but-
but I'm going to advise the board to be very wary of those big things going in front of the houses.
Correct.
Because
Has anyone driven down Pond Road past McDermott's? That used to be Newcomb's,
Okay, so that, right, he's
so he started there.
correct.
Did the Army Corps weigh in on that?
They did originally when it was Newcomb's. So he just needed amending site plan because he was changing, you know, he wasn't doing the riding stable or whatever. But as far as any delineation there, that was back when Newcomb's came in for site plan review, the Army Corps was in there. Remember Pete Gorman, there was a letter,
Mhm.
I can dig it out.
I was just
Yes.
surprised because it looks like he's going through. It's a swamp. It's a wetland. His driveway's going through a wetland.
Give a call to Corey. and
No, I
have him
mean,
go
I
through
just
it all.
an
He's been out
observation.
there.
You
Yeah.
might want to drive down Pond Road and go, wow. That's where the driveway's gonna be?
Also, we have possibly,
Your
hot-
favorite.
Who?
no, not yet, Koshnik Oriental Gardens, but it's really Al Pfeiffer, who's still the owner. Gave me all kinds of stuff today, so we've got Brent Gove, Health Department, wrote a letter, he's got the alarm on his thing, septic system, leach field. All that stuff came in today.
But he doesn't
So,
have any of that stuff. He doesn't have a leach field in a,
well, you have to approve site plan. And then it goes to so I've got a letter from everybody,
Okay.
as long, it's kind of like the same thing, they're coming in for site plan / special use permit. And it's the whole thing with the signatures, and then it's gonna go off, and then it's gonna come back to you to sign. You know, like any type of maps. Human type, right, and Mike Simon's gotta get on that one too.
yeah.
Well, why don't we have? I guess we should my recommendation would be have the building inspector look at this issue and give his
He
opinion.
did,
Yeah.
yeah, I gave it to him
If
today,
he
so
thinks it's
far
ready
looks
for
good.
our review, because it doesn't make any sense for us to do what we already did, which is come in and say,
You don't have a, right,
He did everything that was required of him,
Okay.
is what I'm trying. So Brett Gobe from Monroe County Department of Health wrote a letter, I was copied in on it. And he needed all this stuff, they did it. So Health Department satisfied, which was your concern, site plan amended.
But there's
removing
stuff that
things
they
aren't there.
but the health department says you've got to do this, and this.
And they've done
Did it.
that.
They've
as far
done it
as the
all.
Alarm and all of that.
Okay,
But again, site plan approval goes off. Health department's gonna physically sign the mapping and then it's gonna come to you to sign. Well, Mike and then you.
Is that still gonna have the 2-year review on?
I don't, let me check on that one. Like I said, it came in today and I didn't give it,
The original site had a 2-year review. period
correct, yes.
That no one could enforce because no one knew about it, because it was back when.
Correct, and Brett Bogue caught that, then he had to go to Scotland, then he came back and he did a lot of stuff, so we're. Moving forward in that, so he's gonna appear, I've got to check a calendar is cut off. I would, in my personal opinion, for you, I'd like to put him on October 4th. As opposed to the Batterson Ridgecrest, you know what I mean, I warned him regardless. Any meeting he's on, it's a busy agenda, he's gonna have to wait to be on, you know what I mean, he's not gonna be necessarily first or whatnot. Although for a matter of time, so he'll be here the 4th or the 18th, I'll figure that out tomorrow. And you know what? I didn't want Batterson to ever come back. Oh, sorry. He, so he's got his phase 3, so at this point it's
Did he-
addressing.
Did he meet every single thing? And that was my question. I didn't want him to come back until he has met every single condition that was in the letter that we sent to him.
So
So,
Al LaRue has taken over on this stuff. Kind of, it's going to be your discretion on level of disturbance between you and Mike and all of that. Just under the 5 acre, all of that was addressed. I'll have to go back through it.
right, because
Can I
there
actually
was,
speak to that?
Yeah.
I spoke to the town engineer and I had a call on this.
Are we talking about Matterson or?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, so there's a new.
A few days ago, with the resubmittals, and I think just to get to the point, the general consensus was because of the way they submitted their response, they did it in such a disjointed way. It's really hard to figure out if they provided the things that we asked for. And for some things, it's clear that they didn't.
well, then why are they coming?
Yeah, so I think what's after that discussion. The engineers are putting together a proposed letter to send, basically say, hey, look. Back 6 months ago, we asked for all this stuff. You sent this response. We got a little bit of it, but here's, we didn't get it all.
Right, because we said we didn't want them back until they,
That letter, I sent it no less than.
I know.
Including,
I know.
not including certified.
And it's, that's fine, but they shouldn't be back on the agenda until all of those questions have been answered.
Yeah, I think it's just really hard. The way, we sent this letter, we had a few 1 through 5 do these things, some of them, and they just didn't even kind of respond in towards that letter. They also are trying to, it looks like they're trying to treat this as multiple applications, which in some sense is okay if they're organized about the submittal, but they're kind of like two hands that one doesn't know what the other is doing in a sense. So Al LaRue is doing subdivision of a few lots over here. Glenn Thornton's doing some lots over here. And it's just, we have to do seeker for everything as a single application. So it's just, it's laborious to try to even figure out whether they submitted everything we needed and I think what you're gonna see is a letter come from the town engineer that says. You've got more work to do, we sent this letter and it's still not done.
So, but they stay on the agenda then? And they come in, we just say, sorry, we can't really talk about this because you don't have what,
It may be good for all parties that are involved and wondering why it's not moving forward to actually hear that.
they should know. Can't that come in a letter to them?
It's been sent.
Well, then,
I know, it's the same one.
I mean, it's just, well, okay.
I don't know.
I just feel like that's a lot of waste of time for everybody.
Yeah, I think maybe once you see the engineer's letter, which I think is gonna be ready by probably the end of the week, you can make a decision as to whether it makes sense to come back here.
So that'll be from Mike to Al and Glenn. Is the idea
I
to
think
from
so.
Mike to them?
Yeah, and then we can kind of, I feel like you that we've been waiting and waiting and waiting. Yeah, they made this submittal, but it's still not what.
Right, and I don't want them to be like, well, we've waited long enough, so now we're gonna just, you know what I mean? We might forget what we said we wanted and move forward because now they've done all these other little pieces, but basically that was just the core of it right there, regardless. I don't know. I'm just.
I mean, if you wanna kind of go through the same exercise that Mike and I went through, I would encourage you to look at the April 10th letter. You send that to the group, if they don't have it, that we sent. And then look at the August 25th response that we got and see if you can figure out, A, whether they responded to everything. Which is gonna be hard to figure out. And B, what your conclusion is. And I think our conclusion is there's stuff missing and they're saying, well, they need to provide that. And it's just,
Too many hens in the roost.
yeah, they need to really coordinate with each other.
I should mention that I will be out on October 18th.
Oh, are you kidding?
Yeah, me too. No, just kidding.
Teresa, we need you. Well, they're not coming on the 18th anyway, let's get everything together.
Let's see what's.
Sorry, Teresa won't be here. We're gonna have to reschedule you.
Motion?
To adjourn this meeting? Charlie, did I see you?
I moved. to
Nicole?
adjourn this
Sure.
meeting.
And second?
Yes.
Okay, and all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.